Hello, everybody out there in Twitterland and on YouTube. Welcome to Fantasy NBA Today, a sports ethos presentation. And head on over to YouTube where you can get your questions answered live on this beautiful Sunday evening. Just kind of relaxing. Hitting the mute button before I hack up a lung. It's that time of year where we're just kind of struggling with the kiddo illnesses, and we are, having birthday parties. Had a birthday party at a great place called Rust Dollar yesterday. Kiddo had a great fifth birthday playing with all of the farm stuff they got there, and they were incredibly hospitable. If you're in the Sacramento area, check out Rust Dollar. No, they did not pay me for this, but we were out there all day. And we're all tuckered out, and we're also all tuckered out after a big old B150 update, and I can't wait to put that out here later tonight. So we're getting ready for draft season, and we're on the small forwards tiers. We're looking at ADPs with all the different small forwards, and the question is coming up right off the bat: is small forward kind of thin this year? So we're going to look into that. We're going to explore all of that. Before we do, a quick shout out to our sponsors. Bet Online is your number one source for all things football, and you're on the world's most trusted betting platform. BetOnline has every stat, matchup, and even live odds and spread. That's a terrible read, by the way. Has every matchup and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff? Get in our $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes. Share at $200,000. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino, get in a game of blackjack or poker, unwind with one of our over 150 slots. Head to the website today to get in the action. Bet Online, the game starts here. I thought I could just do that off the top of my head, and I can't, clearly. But yeah, no, we're talking small forward tiers, and the question is this position light? And I was starting to look at it before we started recording, and I was thinking, it is not very light, but it looks light, and it can get light real quick. And it's also in the same vein as the shooting guards that we looked at the other day. It doesn't start off all that hot. There's definitely a lot to be desired in that top high end range. We're looking at all of it. So again, if you are watching and you want questions answered, YouTube's a great place to have that done. You can just post right there in the comments, and we can put the comments right up there online, and we can get to your questions if we have time. We also have trivia coming up in a little bit, and we'll have a lot of fun with that. Presuming Andre has a trivia question ready for me. I kind of think he might not. We'll find out about that here in a quick second. And then other than that, I think we're good to go. Looks like, yep, we are definitely good to go here. So, all right, ADP tiers. This top tier, it includes Scotty Barnes, LeBron James, and Paul George. And this tier, I mean, it's really exciting in the sense that Scotty Barnes is in there. We all saw Scotty Barnes go berserk last season. They're wrapping the entire franchise around Scotty Barnes. And then LeBron James and Paul George. And the ADPs for these guys are ranging in the 19 to 28 range. This is, and a quick aside on positional issues, there's a lot of guys that probably could play small forward that could be in these tiers, and we could talk about them as such. But we're going with, Yahoo tiers, and we are, positions, and we are, we got to group them some way, and this is the way that we're grouping them here. But there's just not a top 5 pick in here. There's just not multiple first rounders in here. There's question marks, especially as we get to LeBron and Paul George. Can these guys stay healthy? Well, they just came off of a year in which they did. In the case of Scotty Barnes, if he has any shift in defensive numbers whatsoever, he becomes incredibly risky because he's getting a ton of value from those defensive numbers. And then at the same time, Scotty Barnes is young. He's a freak. He's got that. I don't want to use the name Magic Johnson because that's sacrilegious, but, in terms of body type and the willingness to pass the ball and sort of pound the ball with a high dribble, he's the closest thing that I've seen without invoking the actual name Magic Johnson, which I just did. But all kidding aside, he is a guy that, theoretically could develop a jump shot, but even if he doesn't develop a jump shot, he has such physical skills that he can be either the best or the second best player on the court just about every night with those tools that he has. It's extremely exciting from a fantasy perspective because he has that what if factor. What if he gets even better? What if he really starts dominating the game? that could be really good for all of those other non-defensive stats. The defensive stats for me are the game with Scotty Barnes, and if you're picking him high, as a lot of people are, and I would say this 19.6 is actually quite low. I don't know if that reflects a lot of public leagues that might not be familiar with how good Scotty Barnes was last year. Maybe they're just sort of looking at the season long totals and forgetting that he had a major injury that cost him most of the last part of the season. I don't know why this is as low as it is. It should be higher, but it's not. In an intermediate and a more competitive league, I think Scotty Barnes is going close to the back end of the first round, maybe falling into the second. So it's a good number if you're competing against the public, but against people who are, got their heads screwed on in fantasy leagues, I think Scotty Barnes, we have to consider him to be a late first round pick, early second round pick, sort of at worst. And he has got that potential. If he has anything of an upgrade in the offensive game, like the shot as I'm describing, he is going to go berserk. But the defensive numbers, they got to hold at least to some degree. If he has an increase in offensive role, there could be some slippage there with defensive numbers. But that, again, is the game for Scotty Barnes. Will the defensive numbers hold up? If they do, everything else is probably going to fall into place, and you probably get a top 20 play in your sleep. And if he plays a lot of games for whatever reason, 76 games, something like that, he will be a first round fantasy play. The question about Toronto and whether or not they're going to tank it all at the end of the year is definitely lingering here. But I do think they just want to cut Scotty Barnes loose and let him have the kind of season that starts to get some accolades. And I think that would actually rev up the free agent engines for them. So I think the organization at large, of course, they're not going to risk any sort of injury. But if you just want to try to get 72, 76 games out of him, I think it's not so concerning that Toronto might tank at the back end of the season. That said, the Cooper Flag stuff is the Cooper Flag stuff. So Scotty Barnes, I'm okay with taking a little bit of a shot to get a Scotty Barnes at the back end of the first round, and definitely any time after that. Now LeBron, he's just a special case, and I know we've probably talked about him a million times, but LeBron is either going to use this season as preparation for next season and when they really have the guns to try to make it happen, or he's going to be so kind of scared of losing basketball in his life that he's going to milk basketball for every second that he can get, or alternatively, he's just going to not risk anything and just try to hang on to the game as long as he can. So what would that look like? A couple 65 game seasons, something like that. As a gamer, I think it's in him to want to try to play all 82 theoretically. I don't know that they're going to do that this season. So I think it's possible LeBron James has the type of season he had last year where he defies expectations, and he's a nice fat profit from fantasy GMs. Same thing happened last season with Anthony Davis. I don't know that I have the same prediction there, but I think that LeBron has the capability of putting up a big games played number. The other side of the coin, will Father Time get him? Will the season crumble upon them in the sense that they're just hovering in that 8, 9, 10 range, and people are getting frustrated, and LeBron looks at this and goes, you know what, I'm not going to lay it all out in the line for this group at this time, especially if next year I can get another bite at the apple. So I'm not dying to draft LeBron James this year. If he falls far enough, I don't know if I would even draft him at 24 as the ADP suggests right here. I probably want him in the third round. And even at that point in time, I'm not that thrilled about doing it, but I probably would do it in the third round. And then Paul George, I know Paul George is getting a ton of love out there for his per game stats and his potential. He's always had a nice history of playing well against high usage players. He did it in OKC, had a big season next to Russell Westbrook there. His game is kind of uniquely situated to just be good in those situations. And then he just came off of a season where he did play a lot, and that was good for him and good for his fantasy GMs. And then he lands in a place in Philly where, with a high usage guy in Joel Embiid, with a high usage guy in Tyrese Maxey, it still feels like they want to get Paul George the ball. So there is a lot of pretext there for making another successful season out of this for Paul George. I think Daryl Morey is on board with Paul George having a successful season. So, I mean, the ingredients are here for everything to go well. It's just the reality of this is that he has not stayed on the floor a lot. I think he does want to preserve additional years in the back end of his career. I don't think you look at a Philadelphia team with Joel Embiid and say, I'm going all in for this particular team, just knowing that the a Joel Embiid injury takes you out of contention right off the bat. And that's hopefully theoretically the reason that you joined the Philadelphia 76ers. And to that end, if he goes down early, does Paul George start taking games off for minor things? That's the concern. And then, of course, what if the injuries just sort of pile up and you can't get much out of your second or your third round pick here? I think it's not the worst pick in the world in this range, because again, he has proven in the past that he can produce with low games. He does have that good fantasy game that sits well with other players. And then what if somebody goes down? Well, he might actually produce more in that time if a Joel Embiid goes down. But again, I think that derails their season. I think that what if scenario doesn't help Paul George. Then I don't think that helps him as much as it might seem. Give me to try to open my eyes wider, Andre. I just ain't going to do that. All right, so this first tier, I'm not excited about this tier. I'll just say that. I'm not excited about this tier because I think, except for Scotty Barnes, I think I am a little bit excited about Scotty Barnes. I just think in general, this tier has trouble kind of written all over it for folks. So I'm not as excited about it. Okay, let's look at tier 2 here, where we have Kawhi Leonard going at about 38.7. Interesting data there. Jalen Williams at 39 and Jaylen Brown at 42. So some big names here. Kawhi Leonard aiming to start this season off. So I guess not much to do about nothing with regard to the injury. I think it confirmed information we already had. I think that, at least in my case, I know that I've worked that into my analysis. I have an opinion about Kawhi Leonard. It wasn't moved at all by any of this except to just confirm what I thought. There was a procedure. Boom, we know it. Okay, we move on. And the good news is that he is trying to be ready for the regular season. So I don't know that it changed anything for me, but it definitely got people riled up out there in the fantasy space. And Jalen Williams, how many superlatives do I have for Jalen Williams? I really think Jalen Williams is ready to have an even bigger year than last year, which is tough because he had a great season. It was a slow start. It was funny during that slow start last year. I ranked him high in the B150. I ranked him as a third rounder. And, he was going about 60 a little bit later, maybe 60, 65 in drafts. And then, everybody's like, oh boy, Jalen Williams is just kind of starting slow and maybe it's not going to happen for him this year. And it was just such an easy prediction. Yes, he will finish in the third round. Yes, he will finish in the third round. And there he did. He finished in the third round. And I think he's going to have an even bigger season this year. Yes, there's crowding in OKC. Yes, there's issues there. I just think that, man, this guy, we don't even know what he's capable of. Some folks, I guess, don't know what he's capable of. Everybody, I think, who's in the business knows what he's capable of. But, I think people aren't ready for what he actually can be. And some of that Shea, you look at Shea, and Shea could theoretically be even better than he was last year. And Shea was amazing. He was a one-man wrecking crew at times. He's uncoverable at times. Defensively, he's great. We're talking about Shea Gilgeous-Alexander here, and that's overshadowing what you're seeing in Jalen Williams' development. The size of Jalen Williams, the way that he moved, it's going to be something of a shocker, I think, for people. In terms of fantasy, is this like a full-on breakout where he's just going to kind of join into that upper echelon of top-tier players and a top 12 finish or something like that? That's asking way too much of the guy. But I do think overall, Jalen Williams is a fine draft pick. You guys are going to be absolutely thrilled to have Jalen Williams. This ADP of 39.1 is embarrassingly low. Jaylen Brown, 42.1. It's another case of name being better than the fantasy game, and that's okay. He came off of winning a world title. I don't think people are quite as in tune with some of the efficiency issues that he has. I don't think people are really weighing the fact that if Boston runs away with it again this year in the regular season, that guys like Jaylen Brown are going to be taking games off. Everybody will sort of rotate and take games off. That's the big risk with this Boston squad. So we're hoping that the East can stay with them a little bit, and then it won't be such a resting situation down the stretch for those guys. But this tier overall, yes, it's headlined by Jalen Williams. Absolutely. He's the standout guy here. But if you don't go in the earlier tier, and you're sitting here looking at this tier. I mean, this is a significant drop off in value from most top end early round value guys. Yes, Kawhi could come in and just rip everything to shreds by playing another 72 games. Even if he played 72 games, that would be awesome. I don't think he's capable of playing 72 games for what it's worth. I think he's going to hit every single back to back as a rest game. I think that when you subtract out those back to backs, the statistical chance of him having 66 games, 56 games, even these things, the 56 games are even a question mark for Kawhi Leonard. So unless you're in a playoff format and you just feel real good about your luck, you got to look at this guy as getting about 50, 60 games, I believe. So that I'm not excited about. And then with Jaylen Brown, he's just never going to hit this ADP, even if everything clicks for him. And I'm a big Jaylen Brown fan. I think he's a great player. I question whether people give Jason Tatum the crown. I'm like, well, why not Jaylen Brown? Why not Drew Holiday? Why not Derek White? I mean, why has it got to be Jason Tatum? I don't know. But anyway, this tier, if you're getting into this tier, you are a little bit into trouble because you're already looking at guys that aren't in the early rounds for a projected finish. So you got to get Jaylen, is basically what it boils down to. Okay, it's Ice Pack in Your Eye trivia time after the break. Okay, apparently it's Sunday, I'm told. I do remember that. And apparently we're going to go easy here on trivia. So we'll see how this goes. Usually I get 7 chances here to not make myself look like an idiot, and that is completely ruled out by the fact that that's already occurring. Among all the OKC players questions in, with a minimum of 40 games played, who had the best assist to turnover ratio? Of all the OKC players with a minimum of 40 games played, who had the best assist to turnover ratio? I think this is a question. I'm just gonna bomb the first name of the player. I get 5 tries today, probably because there's only so many players on this roster. I'll start with Micic. Is that how I say it? Okay. I don't know if that's if I'm getting the X because that's not how I say his name, or if I'm just getting it because I'm wrong, or if Andre's just falling asleep on that button. Both. Okay, I needed to get that one out of the way because that one to me was the trick answer to this thing. And now it would be easy. Well, I mean, we got a couple just obvious. Do I want to burn 2 answers on Shea and Jalen Williams? Do I want to do that? I kind of think I almost have to. If I get 5 tries here and I can take those 2 guys off the board, I'm thinking strategy right now. I'm going to do a double answer of Shea Gilgeous-Alexander and Jalen Williams. That's 1 X. Come on, Steve Harvey, give me that other X. We get to the nuts and bolts of this competition here. Okay. So now this is where the gloves come off, Andre. This is where the gloves come off. Assist to turnover ratio. Oklahoma City Thunder had to have played 40 games last year. Feels like that 40 is real relevant. Like, why would it be 40? Like, Andre wouldn't just stick a 40 in there. Yeah, my mind went somewhere else. Wouldn't just stick a 40 in there and just make it all arbitrary. So what player had 40 games last season to make that happen? I wonder it's because Lindy Waters played 38 and Lindy Waters had apparently a great assist to turnover ratio. I don't think it could be Chet because I don't know if he's passing it enough to make that happen. Maybe it could be Chet. I don't think that's going to be odds on the best. I mean, Dort, every time he gets the ball, he's chucking it up. So it's not that. I don't think it's Isaiah Joe. 3.4 for Lindy. Great job, Lindy. Hey, Lindy just hit a big shot the other day. Great job, Lindy. Davis Bertans. Yeah. Not qualifying at 9. 9. Wow. Great job. I kind of think the trick answer to this one is one of my favorite players, the other Jalen Williams. Give me the other Jalen Williams. Yes. Steve Alexander, I'm heading for you. You might be coming out to California, actually, as we have bet a beer. The person that gets the most trivia questions right this year has to, well, I guess they get to have the other person come meet them and buy them a beer. So coming for you, Steve and Rick. Rick's actually the one I'm afraid of. Rick, it feels like Rick's got stats on stats on stats on stats. Like he's literally got like every stat known to man just sitting there in his Rolodex of a brain. So that's the one I'm worried about. We have to figure out how we're going to work Rick into this conversation here, but I think he's got trivia game, whereas me and Doc are pretty much dead on arrival. Okay, with all of that out of the way, we get to our third tier here, and it's Franz Wagner, Jimmy Butler. You know, these two guys, I'm not excited about this tier either. And the reason I'm not excited is I feel like I've already ridden the Franz Wagner wave last season when it was just a given that he was going to produce either at ADP or better. And I think now that he got the big money, he's basically, you know, kind of a guy now. I think everybody knows Franz Wagner. Orlando's profile it raised a little bit with the playoff appearance. And I think, you know, 46.4 for Wagner. He's getting treated like a premium play. And a couple questions like KCP, you know, he's now crowding this thing even more than it was previously crowded. And, you know, Paolo Banchero, like he's going to take more shots, I think, rather than less shots this season. And then the ultimate thing for Wagner is his shooting question mark is massive. He is going to absolutely need to kind of get the monkey off his back because it's been so long and it just doesn't appear like it's getting any better. And I don't think that's going to crush his value or anything like that. But for him to continue to take steps up through the ranks, he needs to be better and better and better. And he's just not getting there. So I kind of think this is a situation, unlike last season, where I don't know that it's a guarantee he won't hit his ADP, but it feels close to a guarantee that he won't hit his ADP. And now that the equation's tilting the other direction, it's time to get off that. Jimmy, for his part, I don't know what to make of Jimmy. I think like if there's a little bit of a gambling effect taking a Jimmy Butler, no matter what. Didn't work last year. Previous year did. And this year, I don't know if you noticed, but Jimmy showed up with kind of normal hair this year at camp. And I don't know what to say other than when Pat Riley talks trash to you publicly, that's time if you're going to stick around Miami, that is. It's probably time for you to stop flapping the gums and just get after it. And to Jimmy's credit, I think he's definitely got that gear in his game. I mean, he's a guy that talks a big game. He's always been able to back it up. But I think now, later in his career, contract on the line, this is time for Jimmy to really put the business of playing basketball number one. And you look at his games played total for his entire career, it's terrible. And there's been this, it's a load management thing. And I wonder if he is kind of throwing caution to the wind this season. And I'm done with that. I need to reestablish that I play more than 60 games per year. Now, can you bet on that? Can you get over your skis on that? That's a good place to get into some trouble now at 48.5. And I think he's going earlier than this in competitive leagues. The price is right. So I do think Jimmy Butler is something of a decent value in this range. I think it's getting a little bit oversold that Jimmy Butler is a crazy person to draft this season. But there is fatigue, and rightfully so. And then the question of like, what's Miami doing? And are they still on board with Butler? It feels like they wrap themselves around Bam Adebayo. If you just listen to the offseason interviews and kind of how they talked about players, it's all Bam, 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 not so much Jimmy. So what does that mean? Is Jimmy going to take that a little bit, personally, and then just come out banging? Jimmy Butler, his whole career and his Like some of the stories, like I know the cat story kind of got re-dragged out into the media, and people tried to say that that thing didn't happen, but that thing absolutely happened, and that's spectacular. He's got the quote dog in him, and so for him to turn it around this season, it's a long way of saying for him to turn around this season would not surprise me. Now we get to tier four, and again, I think this is there enough here at small forward this season? I think we run into the kind of the same thing. I'm not excited about drafting DeMar DeRozan. DeMar DeRozan will probably do better than a lot of people think. He's going at 54.2 right now. I don't know if it's a situation where we can say, yes, he'll definitely be better than his ADP. I don't know what to make of the Sacramento Kings after, say, like 3 or 4 days with media members running around. I mean, DeMar, everybody's talking a ton. I don't know that they're doing anything out of the ordinary in terms of what they're saying. I think that one thing that sort of struck me listening to all of this is it does not feel like DeMar DeRozan is approaching this any differently than he would, say, like last season in Chicago. I think he feels like his game is malleable. I think he feels like what he does is going to fit anywhere with any team. I think that they all are kind of acting like it's business as usual. I think they got asked about spacing in Sacramento, and they're like, what's the issue with DeMar's like, what's the issue with spacing? Well, I mean, we're going to find out, right? And then the talk of Sabonis taking multiple threes per game, I thought that was pretty funny because that's not going to happen. But they're kind of fading the idea that they have issues there. And the issues are namely spacing and not enough basketballs to go around. And yeah, I'm actually of the camp that thinks that DeMar DeRozan is the guy that can actually make this work. I actually believe that when you put Sabonis and DeMar DeRozan and Keegan Murray and De'Aaron Fox, and you put them all together on a basketball, they're smart basketball players that can make this work. Now, did they do anything with the defense? No. Are they ever going to get rid of the issue of Sabonis at center defensively? And I'm sorry, you cannot send the defensive metrics from name a website here that are trying to position Domantas Sabonis as a good defensive player. It's just not the truth. It won't happen like that. So they're not addressing core issues of defense, and they don't have any silver bullet for this not enough basketballs to go around thing. That's my concern here. If I kind of just look at this in a vacuum, could DeMar DeRozan hit 54.2? Absolutely. Does he have a stat set that actually makes it likely? Yeah, I think he does. Am I excited about DeMar DeRozan at 54.2? No, I think you might get like 48. Maybe he'll play a lot of games and you could get 36 out of him. But the downside risk is that things start to fall apart in Sacramento for whatever reason. Like the trade didn't work, or probably not the trade, but the acquisition and then the trade for Sabonis. So you could just start to see the writing on the wall, and they all start to go, this isn't working. And then people get frustrated, and then you start to see things crumble a little bit. That would be the downside case for DeRozan. I don't think it's likely. I'm just not that excited, I would say, because let's say it goes south, it might look like top 75 for DeMar DeRozan. And there's not a lot of upside beyond the late, probably early fifth round value that he's got in his ADP there. So that's a lot of bars on DeMar DeRozan. And I'm happy the Kings got him, in their current search for ways to make this configuration work. It was the best they could have done on the market. And he's a good guy. And I'm excited to watch the Kings play basketball for like the third year straight. So that's good for them. Miles Bridges, 58.4. They were just on earlier, and I was trying to watch them, and I think you're going to see an update in ADP for LaMelo Ball. He's out there doing LaMelo Ball things. And what this means for Miles Bridges is I think I'm not quite seeing the correlation between LaMelo Ball playing and Miles Bridges getting better or more value out of that. Better shots, or more value out of that in a fantasy league. I kind of think it might be neutral. 58.4, I think, is probably a little late for Miles Bridges, considering if everything goes well for him, he could probably be a third round play. He has history in this territory. He also has the history, and I know you guys all know that. And that's probably why this ADP is lower than it probably should be. I don't see like game breaking upside out of Miles Bridges. I think there is probably as many reasons that he won't do as good as his ADP as there's reasons that he will do as well as his ADP. So this is a very boring vanilla, and if anything, if there is a silver lining for this tier, I would say is they do represent a safer play. If you want to kind of punt this position a little bit and you just want the valuations that they're bringing to the table, and along with Franz Wagner, you do have three targets here that are going to be middle round players. You can kind of count on injury wise, not a ton of injury risk there. Their bodies aren't falling apart. So to that end, I do think you have a safer landing pad here than you would with a bunch of other players, like LeBron or Paul George. But again, not that exciting. And when you look at the totality of what we've talked about so far here, also not exciting because there's not a lot of high end upside. There's a ton of risk on the board so far. And again, as Rick Campbell would say, this position is really hard to stock. So if you can get somebody that you perceive to be a good value, if you can get somebody that you perceive to be durable, that's half of the battle here. And maybe some of those answers are here in tier 5. Maybe some of those answers are here in tier 5. The private chat just got funny. Talking Sacramento Kings. What could go wrong, right? Brandon Ingram, 64.8. I know that's not the headliner you guys wanted to hear. Brandon Miller, 65.9. Josh Giddy, 69.1. Michael Porter Jr., 70.3. I'm starting to like this tier. I don't like the Brandon Ingram thing. I mean, that's a public number that's obviously not on the board for us as we talk about fantasy sports here. We're not looking at Brandon Ingram at 64. We're not looking at Brandon Ingram at 84, I don't think. I think it's taking like 94 for us to be looking at Brandon Ingram, and probably a positive news story wouldn't hurt. But Brandon Miller, 65.9. I did catch a little bit of him just now. And then again, I'm going to be doing a ton of film review between now and say like the next Sunday. It's just going to be all film all the time. And Brandon Miller, I don't know that he looked to me like sometimes a player, especially in their second or third year, they come back and it's like, whoa, what happened? They ate their Wheaties or whatever. And Brandon Miller, I haven't got that wow factor yet from him. I'll rewatch again and reevaluate. That means nothing bad about him. That doesn't mean that his fantasy value is bad. That doesn't mean that I'm not happy about Brandon Miller heading into this second season here. It just means that I didn't see anything that made me think, wow, what did he do last summer? I think he's going to do just fine. I think there is still potential for him to take another step up the ladder and just get more involved in the game. And that's like literally just icing on top of the cake. I think this kind of valuation shows you what a player in Charlotte has happened to them. In fantasy valuations, there's just not a lot of excitement there for Brandon Miller for whatever reason. I do know he's getting talked about in fantasy circles, but it's just the overall population as a whole practically doesn't know Brandon Miller exists, it seems like. And that is why he's got a 65.9 ADP here. If he had, if he played in Los Angeles or if he just had even a little bit more visibility, I think that'd be 55.9. And I do think both numbers would be fine. To draft him at 55.9 milks his value just a little bit, but I would say at 55.9, if that was the number here, he would probably tick up and over that number. It's actually, he might be the Franz Wagner of this draft. So where I just know he's going to get his value. Like that's a given. So Brandon Miller, kind of an easy pick at 65.9. Giddy at 69.1. This one's interesting to me because I thought I was like lowest on Giddy on the board. And I think I saw a question from Steve Sloan. I'll get to that question here in a second, Steve. Thank you very much. Giddy, I thought I was the lowest on Giddy. And it turns out that after I run all the numbers and I kind of dinged him for all the things that I thought he couldn't do on the basketball floor, it felt like he actually popped out pretty well in the B150, which is available tomorrow for all sports subscribers. So get over to sportsethos.com. Again, 400 hours put into this thing. And this season, it feels really good. I feel like the intel that we just keep rolling over from season to season just makes it a little bit easy. But I digress. Giddy, 69.1. I think he'll hit his value even in a 9-cat league at this number. I do think that he's not going to be given the car keys in Chicago right away. I don't even know if he'll get the car keys in general. I think the car keys will go to Kobe White. I think Zach LaVine obviously has something to say about that. Lonzo Ball, I think maybe we'll see him play like, say, 18 minutes a game to start off if he can stay on the floor. And then they'll probably just keep cranking them up from there. And they'll probably be back to backs that are off. It doesn't make any sense to put him in the starting lineup. That would be a nightmare. I don't know if I've heard anything like that. Please don't do that, Chicago. That sounds terrible. But he could take games off. He could just play 18 minutes a game, give you what he's got, see if he can hold up, and then he could just kind of add from there for whatever reason. If there's a miracle, man, I would love to see it. I love watching Lonzo Ball play basketball, but it's just not factoring into much, I don't think, as we go forward here. So again, Josh Giddy, he's not going to get the keys, but he's just got a really fantasy friendly game in some respects. And I do think that when you make that deal, the way that they made that deal, they're committed to having the ball in his hand. He gets a lot of grab and goes. He gets a lot of stuff in the flow of the offense too. So it's not like he needs the ball in his hands per se to make all of this work. I think a lot of people out there just think it's going to be full Giddy all the time. And it's just not going to be that. You know, Kobe White outclasses him significantly on both sides of the ball. So it might be Kobe White all day. So that's my story with Giddy, but I'm happy in this tier. You know, when you're looking at it, it's like, oh, I'm not excited. I think this, and then Michael Porter Jr. at 70.3, I think this is good. I think it's a great place to get Michael Porter Jr. I come from the days where you had to spend a second round pick to get Michael Porter Jr. and then cry all season. That's a mistake that a few of us made a few years ago. But at 70, I think he's developing. I think that kind of the what if factors in Denver are really good for him. I think that there is some elements of a strong fantasy game in there. We'll never know if he's going to, in between the ears ever be the best team and or, in between the ears guy. He has taken steps forward in that regard, I think. Michael Malone, Nikola Jokic, they tend to have an effect on people. So I kind of see more positive from Michael Porter Jr. than I've seen negative, which in the past, I think that weighed heavily into an evaluation for him. But I think he's good to go. As long as Denver, I do have one thing going on with Denver that's just been sitting in the back of my head. It's like, man, when the Michael Malone stories start coming out, you're just like, who in the background is scheming? And, is there an issue in Denver where somebody back there is scheming? I don't know who it is. I mean, I knew who it was in Sacramento, and we covered that a lot, and it went, kind of viral, so to speak, talking about all that stuff. But like, that was a long time ago. That guy is still kind of affiliated with that team. Talking about a Pete D'Alessandro, the Sacramento, back when he was GM, and the stories about Michael Malone, who's not a good coach, and he's on his way out, and all this stuff. And it was funny that Denver became kind of the landing spot for all of the next generation of that. And you're starting to hear some of that stuff now. And if that happens, this is the long point coming full circle here. If that happens, the team will be pro Michael Malone. They love him. They just flat out love him. There might be like a player or two who doesn't love him. They will flat out love him. It could bring them all together if that stuff starts happening. But if it gets gravity to the point where players start to smell the stench of death coming, then they could start getting frustrated. And then you could start to see a lot of things start going wrong. And I would be curious to see if not curious to see. I'm just holding that off as a thing to think about in the back of my head as tiebreakers, for certain guys and where they're getting drafted. But overall, love Michael Porter Jr., love Josh Giddy, love Brandon Miller in terms of where they're being drafted in this tier, and in terms of can you get a quality option and spend your draft picks elsewhere in the draft and get these guys kind of where they're at. I like this tier. So it's the first time I've really liked the tier out of our first 5 tiers here. Okay. We have a couple things to mention here before we move into the next few tiers. We got an industry mock tomorrow. We're going to be doing that live. All sorts of big names throughout the industry. Anybody and anybody who's in the industry. No, just a lot of big names in the industry that are coming to do this industry mock. We'll do it live. We'll kind of narrate the thing. I think me and Rick are drafting a team together as we call the action. Doc will be in it. Some of our guys here at Sports Ethos will be in it. And then we got folks from around the industry, names that you know and love. So that will be at 1 p.m. Pacific time, thereabouts. So keep an eye out for that. And also, if you're listening to this on Twitter and you have questions, get on over to YouTube so you can get your question up on the air. The question that we have from Steve Sloan, or it's more of a statement. Miller's numbers will go down with LaMelo back. LaMelo is such an interesting cat from a basketball perspective. I mean, I just watched, I'm watching this with one eye over here, and there's this like sequence where he drives through the lane and he creates this amazing easy three for forget who shot it, and it's like, yeah, LaMelo Ball, man, that guy's got the tempo of the game. He just got the game on a string, and then the next play he just runs down and chucks a three, and it's like totally out of tempo, totally not necessary, and I'm like, oh, okay, but LaMelo Ball is back, and so the question as to whether it helps or hurts Miller probably keeps his upside in check, but also keeps his downside in check. And that's sort of the thing with Miller that's a little bit interesting because he's, your quote unquote rookie with the young legs. He should be that fancy sports car that everybody wants to draft. And at the same time, it just feels like everything's getting smushed into his ADP. So he's doesn't have the upside, doesn't have the downside, and yet he is a young player that theoretically should be all upside and not safety, but it's the other way around with Brandon Miller. So thank you for the question, Steve, and you guys keep them coming in. Tier 6 is Trey Murphy, Jonathan Kuminga, Herb Jones, R.J. Barrett, Chris Middleton. So Chris Middleton, obviously, I'm actually, it's easy to bag on Chris Middleton, but I'm not going to do it because I think at 104, at least you could start building a case for Chris Middleton. I do think Chris Middleton, I would love to see Chris Middleton drop like a rock in like some expert leagues where nobody's going to draft Chris Middleton. It's just like sacrilegious to draft Chris Middleton. You're like so stupid if you draft Chris Middleton. It goes down to 110, 120. And at that point, why not? I mean, yeah, if he doesn't play, he doesn't play. And maybe he'll be dead roster weight. And maybe, you'll just get constantly broken by missed games, where you can't really milk the value out of it. I just think that at some point in time, players get so toxic that there's actually that reverse value there. He might be fitting that description. So it's probably most helpful if I tell you guys, what do I think Chris Middleton's capable of? And on a game-to-game, per-game basis. And I think the answer right there is something in the realm of like top 60, 65. If things are going real well for Chris Middleton. And that's, that's valuable, especially if he's dropped to 100. Especially if he falls in an expert league past that. It will be a mess at times. Will he be a top 100 play? I'd say there's probably a good like 55, 60% chance that he could be a top 100 play. Now, will I draft him based on that? That's, kind of probably up to the roster build and how much risk I've taken on in a draft and whether I need the player or the position. But Chris Middleton, he's the guy on this list that nobody wants. Everybody else is kind of a guy that people have been targeting or maybe the hype's worn off on somebody like Jonathan Kuminga, who started to fall, I think, in ADP. But generally speaking, I think people want to have Trey Murphy, 93.8. Right hamstring strain will sideline him from basketball activities for at least 3 weeks. So here we go again, right? And I think that's probably fine to just sort of, I don't want to say disregard, but I don't know that it's moving rankings. I don't know that... maybe it should move rankings at least a little. That's actually something I'll be looking at later before I do my final update is like, how much I want to ding him, in this new development. It definitely sucks to have it happen because players are definitely out of shape as it relates to game shape in the NBA. So these 3 weeks are really big and yeah, they'll ramp up and all of that. And then just in terms of grabbing a position and getting a foothold on it and really just taking it by the reins, this becomes an issue. And then the Brandon Ingram stuff on top of it might even add a little bit of fuel to that fire in the sense that like, okay, if you want to get Trey Murphy nice and healthy and you want to put Brandon Ingram out on the market and get max value for Brandon Ingram, who doesn't have any real value kind of in the association, at least right now. I think people are over his contract. I think they're over his injury risk. I think they're questioning whether or not he can fit in certain team constructs. And so you can get Brandon Ingram out here and let him reestablish that value. Have some big games in October and November, like really blow it out. Go for 40, and then get back to the trade market and see what you got. So Trey Murphy, perfect guy to sit during that. So if you put the tinfoil hat on a little bit and start thinking in that direction, maybe this thing for Trey Murphy is a little bit bigger. But in terms of the player, he is really just from a fantasy perspective, he's got great free throw efficiency, 3-point shooting numbers. I think there's a game that's expandable there. So he is somebody that in this tier at these costs, that he's a good guy to have in this tier at these costs. So Trey Murphy, good. Yeah, how's that for a summation? Jonathan Kuminga, 95.6. You're going to learn a lot about the Warriors in the coming days. I thought their starting lineup that they didn't, and I haven't read through the notes, so maybe this has already been refuted, but in game one, they basically put out a lineup, but they just were like, no, that's not the lineup. A lot of good reporting out of The Athletic and Anthony Slater on kind of how this team could come together. I suggest you go read that, but basically trying to figure out who should play next to Steph. You're starting to see, like, where do they play Draymond Green? Do they play him at center? Do they play him at power forward? And how much of it is all done to accommodate Jonathan Kuminga? And Steve Kerr's comments have been that I don't view him as a small forward. So that's the key to him getting a lot of minutes, folks. Dre will play a little bit of center, but they don't want to play him a ton at center. So by default, he needs to play at small forward. And they got a guy named Andrew Wiggins that they like better. So Jonathan Kuminga, he started out as like a kind of a bigger name in fantasy circles. I think sort of the what if surrounding Jonathan Kuminga was driving that. And then as maybe the realization that, oh yeah, you remember last year when Steve Kerr really didn't want him to play. Oh yeah, that might happen again. And then you start to see him come back down in ADP, and just no really great news coming out of no like huge stories about Jonathan Kuminga getting a ton of responsibility. That I think has softened that ADP. And at 100, I'm not dying to get Jonathan Kuminga on my fantasy team, so I wouldn't be excited here about Jonathan Kuminga. Herb Jones, on the other hand, Herbert Jones. I swear this broadcast school will pay off at some time, folks. I just don't know when it will be. He's at about 100. I mean, he's perennially undervalued. Everybody knows how I feel about Herbert Jones. If I had to say his first name, it'd be a lot easier to just say it. I think you're Herbert from now on, Herbert. But yeah, he's just an easy win at this value. I love Herbert Jones. I think that he's way more of a basketball player than people think of him as just this defensive specialist. I think his game is expandable. Last season, when people were fielding cut questions, I'm like, what the heck are you guys doing? I think he finished in the top 40 last year. I think that the sky is the limit for Herb Jones. And, yeah, it will be rocky, but a little help by this injury to Trey Murphy. It'll be rocky from game to game, but you got to ride those waves. You can't just like jump off the ship because, he had 12 points and only had like a steal and a block. Like, that's not how you play this game. But at any rate, so Herbert, a nice player in this tier. And then RJ Barrett had a decent enough time in Toronto. And I think, playing next to Julius Randle must be terrible. And the fact that he's basically Julius Randle, just doubling the Julius Randle effect, that was predictably bad in New York. I think the players in Toronto, they fit a little bit better. I do think they'll have some shooting issues. Grady Dick will be key in, kind of shoring that up. But like for Barrett's part in it all, I do think that he's learned how to play the game of basketball a little bit better. And I think that RJ Barrett at 100 is not laughable the way it would have been laughable in prior seasons. And we all know his fantasy issues and such. I'm not sure he'll beat 100, but at least it's a conversation. And at least he's a young, healthy, strong player with a good, solid role. Maybe doesn't impact winning so much that you got to really take him off the court, a ton at the end of the year. So RJ Barrett, it's a decent, this tier is pretty good. None of these guys, except for Chris Middleton, is going to just disappear this season. I mean, if you have concerns about Murphy after all of the knee stuff and just, kind of generally not being on the court when you want him to be on the court and him losing some trust, okay, I get it. But generally speaking, these four non-Chris Middleton players in this tier, I like them. So I think in this tier, if you didn't get people ahead and you didn't get the player you liked early on, I think this tier is a nice little safe landing spot. If you're listening to this on Twitter, head on over to YouTube because you can get your question answered on air. All right, let's check it out. Tier 7, we got Josh Hart, Amin Thompson, Cam Johnson, Clam, if you will. Then you have... You can't write it like that and expect me to read it correctly, Avdia, Andre, Aaron Neesmith, and Jaime Jaquez. True story. Andre was trying to get me to say the name as Jaquez, knowing that I would never be able to say the name correctly ever again. That Andre. Oh my God. Okay. This tier, it's pretty dang interesting in the sense that like there's Jaime Jaquez. Yes, it's interesting in the sense that you've got some guys that are a little bit of a live wire. You know, Josh Hart had a big finish last season, and with the trade of Julius Randle, he's sort of back into that. Could he be a top 75 guy if everything sort of breaks correctly for him? And just knowing that Tibbs loves him and New York loves him and that he's definitely going to be in the mix. That's what drives the excitement there. Amin Thompson, talent through the roof. Now, is there a crowd that he's got to play through? Absolutely, but talent through the roof. Clam Johnson has been a mid-round guy forever. Just when he's on the floor, he needs to do that, and it hasn't happened. And yes, he's had some stretches during injured time where he's been trying to play through it where he wasn't quite that good. But like a typical Clam Johnson should get you top 75 value, like without any question whatsoever. It's just a question of what's Brooklyn going to be doing at the end of the season. And then as a guy that needs other players to play around him for him to be better, you know, he needs better players around him. He doesn't have that right now. So it could get messy. Avdia, love the player, needs to fix some things from a fantasy perspective. I think Portland wants him to play. They definitely have a need. There's definitely more of a need now. After what's his name? I'm drawing a blank here. Andre, who just got injured in Portland? Sharp. Yeah, that guy. Why, Shaden? Why? It's like, come on, man. You need to just stay healthy and show us what you can do for one season. Take that step forward. And already out 4 to 6 weeks. Avdia, obviously a beneficiary of that. That is, to me, I don't think Avdia is going to like blow up or anything. I don't think he's like, one of the B150 big risers where nobody knows him and he's going to finish top 50. He's not that guy. But he's going to do just fine. And I do think there is a chance that he gets more run rather than less run, even in a tanking scenario. Because you got to kind of, if you're going to have a guy like Denny run the show to whatever degree, I think you do need to get that tempo going throughout the entire season. And especially on a team with a lot of young players that are trying to find their way. If you're going to go Denny, which I think there's plenty of reason to go Denny, I think you got to be a little bit more consistent with it. So it's a little bit of additional consideration because by and large, Portland's going to tank. That's going to be that. So the last half of March, even for Denny, it could be pretty ugly. But if, they lose enough players and he's the last man standing and they're not a threat to lose games or win games every night, he would be the kind of guy, along with Scoot Henderson, that I think they might run out there more than the other guys. Neesmith, we know all about Neesmith from last season. He just has a fantasy-friendly game. They like him in Indy. He's a part of their DNA, the toughness factor. He's versatile. He doesn't need the ball in his hands. He fits well with Tyrese Halliburton, and he's just going at 131. He'll probably trip and fall over this mark. Now, will he get you more than, say, top 75? No. Is he getting you top 75 based on compiling a ton of stats and playing a lot of games and being sort of a 9-cat guy where, all the planets are aligning for? Yeah, there's a lot of that going on with Aaron Neesmith. So if it's a per-game situation, you need more pop. Speaking of which, Rick Campbell releasing his Pop Guys article here pretty soon. Doc A releasing his My Guys article. He was the first My Guys guy, I think. Can't confirm that. Rick says he's the first fantasy basketball purveyor there ever was. That one actually seems legit. I'm almost certain. And he always says if you were playing or created a fantasy basketball league before he did, to let him know, send him a message, and he'll take that off of his Twitter profile. But back to the point, Neesmith is a really solid pick. It's just make sure that your per game needs can be satisfied, because a lot of you guys will play in shallow leagues or games cap leagues where you're just constantly needing top 75 value to play. And Neesmith probably won't get you there. But overall, if you're not in that slim set of leagues where that actually is a thing, Neesmith's fine. At 131, he's a freaking bargain. Knock yourself out. and enjoy the value. Jaime Jaquez in this tier, and this is how we're going to close it out here. I wish he was just better at fantasy because I think he's a good basketball player. I've seen him do it in high leverage moments. I mean, yeah, they kind of went away from him a little bit, and I just think that was Eric Spoelstra just laying into his young guy. Like, that's it. Like, yeah, he came back, he was better for it. I think you'll see that kind of rinse, lather, and repeat over the next couple seasons. I think he'll be an even better fantasy or better basketball player in 3-4 years, and then maybe by then that's enough goodness to the bad fantasy numbers to be propped up. And you're kind of looking at him, okay, I know I'm going to get a mid-round value out of him just because he's good and he plays 32 minutes a game. Now, I don't think that's the case. I don't think that he's bad. In fact, I've got him projected pretty high. It's just I keep coming back to, like, there's players that I almost project worse than him that I like the what-if factor better. Then I got to put those guys higher than Jaime Jaquez. So I think the value is not the problem. I just think the potential upside and the lack thereof is bumming me out with Jaime. And on that bummer of a note, that will be the end of this show. And I thank you guys for taking time on your Sunday with a lot of football going on. You got family stuff. You're getting ready for the week. You guys show up and you guys are rambunctious and I like it. So thank you guys for coming on board. Thank you guys for all the great messages. I swear my email, you guys don't know when you send this little message with your 1 to 2 sentences that are very warm and encouraging and heartwarming. You guys don't know what that does. That really does power the coal engine, so to speak. You know, we're sitting here, you know, B150ing it up and you know, working around the clock. You know, not a lot of sleep involved these days, and we're doing everything we can to focus on creating this sustainability engine here for this industry that's sort of fallen apart a little bit. And we want to make sure that as the industry itself figures things out, you know, as social platforms figure things out, you know, we want to be like there and make sure that everybody's got a place that they can call home and the trains are running on time. So everybody's just crushing it over here, pulling for each other, working hard, but it is tired. You know, we are tired. There's a lot of tired people over here. I got bags underneath my eyes. We're pushing it. Your guys' messages, we'll get a message in the email and I'm like ready to run through a brick wall again. And I just want to say thank you guys for that. It's been really heartwarming over the last couple of weeks. B150 All Sport Pass. If you want to get the B150, get that All Sport Pass. It's only $1 over the NBA Fantasy Pass. So these guys in football and baseball, by the way, they're killing it. These guys have culture for days. They're pushing. They're trying to do things the right way. You know, you can't just show up and become some sort of a superstar without like doing the work and really just like laying into it like that. And they're doing everything the right way and their content is great. So while you probably know us for basketball, if you're doing it if you're playing football, if you're playing baseball, and once you get a whiff of what these guys are doing, you're like, okay, I get it. These guys are good. And you get that with the All Sport Pass. So I highly recommend you get that because you get the B150 access. You get the draft tracker, by the way. Draft tracker is amazing. It's like an unfair advantage in drafts. So definitely download that thing, figure it out. Doesn't take much, but get that thing in your queue, so to speak. So you guys, when the draft's real for you, you know how to use it, and you've just gotten everything out of it. It makes it so easy. I can't say enough about that. Made by the great Andre Lemus. Lemus? I don't know, but he wants to kill me every time I do that bit. And that's going to do it for us. This has been Fantasy NBA Today, presented by Bet Online. Ladies and gentlemen, be well.